What's up everyone, my name is Sean and I work on Soda Dungeon, and today I'm going to answer some questions. I haven't made a video in quite a while, but it's a new year, I got a new recording set up, so I thought I'd go to Reddit and just post a thread where we said, ask us anything. Just so you know, Poxs Power is the name of the artist who works on Soda Dungeon, and he already went through the Reddit thread. He provided some of his own responses, so I'll include those here when relevant. Let's get started. Where exactly did the idea of Soda Dungeon come from, and whatever happened to the weird dungeon game mode from the original? Also, why not Beer Dungeon? Okay, so, Soda Dungeon started basically as like a Final Fantasy battle game. We just had some extra sprites laying around that we wanted to kind of mess with and see what we could turn them into. We added a tavern to act as basically the home base that you would come back to, and you would buy equipment and hire new adventurers. We realized it was more fun to just keep everything you found in the dungeon instead of just completely resetting every time, so that was an early thing we did. Probably one of the key factors was that at the time, Poxs and I were both playing a lot of clicker heroes, so to us, like the idle genre was kind of new. So we're playing clicker heroes and we're kind of seeing that they have this reset mechanic, and we basically just thought, why can't we just do it in our game too? Which isn't exactly the same. We do the dimensions, not a full reset, but that definitely inspired that part of it. Probably the last major piece was just auto combat. I added that early on for testing, just to make it easier to play through the game. But as we gave the game to people, we found that was kind of the way that they would play the game, is just keeping auto combat on. So the game kind of, it went from just a battle game to like a dungeon management simulation, and we just kind of stuck with it. So it originally was Beer Dungeon. That was kind of the joke, was that the only way you could get these people to go into the dungeon was to give them alcohol and convince them to fight for you. So obviously we moved to Soda for a couple of reasons. One, it is more marketable. It's easier to put out a game like this. I'm sure we could have done alcohol, but it's more kid-friendly, and it's just, like I said, it's easier to just market the game when it's a little bit sillier. But it also lets us be more silly with the game. It kind of gives us a license to be really stupid, and that helped develop the game's humor style, I guess, because it makes sense as beer, but like soda is so stupid that you would give it to people to make them go into the dungeon. So I guess that's it. That's the joke. So it lets us just come up with really dumb ideas, and they're all okay. Any plans for spin-offs or other games expanding into other genres? Not really at the moment. It's crossed my mind before. I definitely at some point in time would like to make a more classic adventure RPG, and I'm sure it'd be fun to use Soda Dungeon characters for that. So that's a possibility, but I think the most logical step for Soda Dungeon, if we were to do another genre of game, would be something in probably the roguelike area, since that's kind of like, that feels like the next step away from where we are right now, since we already have a lot of the idea of resetting and going back in again. It's not really something I play a lot of or have worked on before, so it kind of feels out of my comfort zone. So I don't know if I plan to do that, but at any rate, nothing's planned at the moment, but we'll definitely let you guys know. On the click to begin screen, there's an item on the pile of coins that I don't recognize. What is it? So Poxs already responded here. He said, it's an early equip I drew I had called the Crystal Shield. And so I just want to add on to that. There's a number of unused assets that we have both in and out of the game. Back in the beginning, we just kind of came up with a whole bunch of stuff, a ton of enemies, a ton of items, and we weren't really sure where everything was going yet, but we did know that we were going to plan to have multiple dungeons. So at that time, we still went ahead and made promo art, like the cover art and some of the stuff you see on Steam, and we used some of those items. It wasn't until later that we really finalized which items went where, and we realized we wanted to reserve some of those items for a different dungeon, so you will see them in the future, but they're just not there right now. What steps did you take as a game dev to get where you are now? I'm just going to say, I'll put Poxs' answer up here on the screen. His answer pretty much covers it, so if you just want to like pause that and read it, you can do that. But I guess to give you more of my perspective, so I've been working on games for about 20 years now. Poxs is probably pretty similar. We came up in a kind of different time, so I'm not going to say our experience is 100% relevant to telling new developers what to do, but I do think a lot of the basics remain true. I don't see them changing that much, which is basically, if you want to start out into games, it doesn't really matter all that much what engine you choose or what platform or what technology. You just have to start really small. Think of the smallest, dumbest ideas you can think of, and then make those first. So if you want to make a Soda Dungeon type of game, don't try to make Soda Dungeon, just make like a turn-based battle game or an inventory management system or just a dialogue system. Because, I mean, I promise that stuff will occupy you for weeks. Just work on a lot of small pieces, and then over time, you will have worked on enough small pieces that you can start to see how to put them together into bigger projects. You also need to understand that like your first games are probably just going to suck. Your first 5 to 10, if not more games, they're not going to be that great because you need to have a learning experience. So just start small and be realistic with your goals and expectations. What is your favorite monster design, not boss, regular monster in both games? Poxs is all about the vacation lobsters, which is funny enough that we don't have them in the new game yet because they're one of the things that we reserved for a future dungeon. For me, I'm going to say it's really silly. In Soda Dungeon 2, I'm a big fan of the creme brulee monster because I just want to eat it. It just looks so good. Soda Dungeon 1, another stupid one, but in the Layer of Despair, I like the cooked bird because it's just completely ridiculous. Do you think bringing Soda Dungeon to the Switch would be a smart move? I would love to make a game for the Switch, but I don't think Soda Dungeon is really the right fit. A couple big reasons. Probably the biggest one holding us back right now is just the fact that the game was designed for just touch input only, like touch and mouse. We never really designed it. I didn't program it with controller support in mind, and I know that if we move to a platform like the Switch, Nintendo's going to require us to have full gamepad support. And there's a lot of menus in the game that would take a lot of work to get that working with. Also, the other thing is that I don't think idle games are usually... I don't think a lot of console players want idle games. The Switch would maybe be an exception because it's kind of like in between a console and a tablet in some ways. But I still don't think a lot of people really want to just set their Switch down and let it run 24/7 like you would on other platforms. So, what's happening with the Dinner Boys? Okay, I gotta explain a little bit of this. So, for those of you unaware, in Soda Dungeon 1, we put basically a really dumb joke class in the game called the Dinner Boy. The way it worked was there were special conditions under which the soda junkie would turn into a dinner boy in the tavern. Basically, that you had to have your auto-equip settings set to a certain value, and then there was like a 50-50 chance that if there was a soda junkie sitting at a table with food, they would become a dinner boy. And all that meant was that their name said Dinner Boy, and they came equipped with special equipment. They would come with a bib and a fork. And it kind of became a thing because the fork had, for early game players, it had decent crit stats. So it was kind of this like kind of secret thing that some people would go for. So they're not in Soda Dungeon 2 right now. They were when we launched the game. But I encountered a number of reports that seemed to link the hiring the Dinner Boys to wiped save files, which is never good. I believe the bug had more to do with the item leveling system, and I think we were in a weird spot where you could get the Dinner Boy, get their equipment, and then level up their equipment, the fork or knife or the bib or whatever, and then that would trigger a different kind of bug. The problem is that I fixed that bug, but I was never able to 100% confirm that that was the actual cause of the Dinner Boy issue. So at this point, I've mostly just been scared to re-enable them because losing save files is pretty much the worst thing that can happen. It's almost like a risk to reward thing where like the potential risk of losing a save file over just having the Dinner Boy show up for like a meme wasn't really worth it to me. I'm definitely going to bring them back at some point. Probably, if anything, I might remove the current conditions and just change it to like having them be a separate character that shows up that you just talk to and they give you equipment. So it's not quite the same thing that would have caused the bug to begin with. So hopefully you'll see them soon. Why isn't there more soda in Soda Dungeon? Pox says there's enough. So funny enough, this question does come up every now and then, and I honestly never really have a great answer. It's one of those things where we just went with soda in the tavern, and we probably didn't overthink it for the rest of the game. At one point in time for Soda Dungeon 2, I did have this idea where I wanted to make a soda brewing system where you would turn spare materials into like one-time dungeon bonuses to take in with you. That kind of ended up morphing into the chef, who uses ingredients to do a similar thing, although it's not quite the same. I don't know, maybe the soda is just a means to an end. Any plans to add another shop? Any plans for more oddities? For any endgame content? Maybe New Game Plus? Okay, so we definitely have more oddities planned. Those are usually relatively easy to implement, and I think endgame players enjoy them a lot. So, for example, I'd like to do something that maybe lets you generate battle credits while you're inside the dungeon. maybe something that allows chests to only spawn gold instead of items, stuff like that. So for other endgame content, the update I'm actually working on next after we finish item plating, I'd like to add basically an adventure guild, which would kind of serve two purposes. One would be adding more milestones to the game. Let's say you got to like level 5,000 and maybe you'd get a new legendary crafting recipe, or you get to level 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, and there would just be some different unique rewards for getting to those milestones. The other part of the guild, though, is that I would like to work on a sort of a challenge system. I call it the daily climb right now. I don't know for sure if that will be what it ends up called, but the idea is that it would roll kind of like random mods for the dungeon, like enemies have more health, or there's a greater chance of ambush or something like that. You could take a team in, you could use whatever equipment you want, but relics would be turned off. And the idea would be to see how far you can make it in one run with a team under those conditions. And then that would award you some form of points. Those points would be spent in a different shop. I don't know what exactly the shop would contain yet. I have some ideas, but that's where we are right now, and I'll give you guys more information when we actually get there. So what does the 1 million floor text mean? Will we get a use for the only mythic item in the game, and why are there so many empty spaces in the item compendium? So the 1 million floor text, again, if you guys don't know, if you get to level 1 million, there's basically just this message that says you shouldn't be there. And that was basically a placeholder until we could put something more interesting in. So when we launched the game, I wasn't really sure how quickly players could make it to 1 million. I figured it was going to happen. I wasn't sure how it compared to Soda Dungeon 1. One of the original ideas was that like you would get to level 1 million and there'd be some special boss there, and if you defeated it, you would actually reset the game like completely. I didn't really get a chance to put that in, and after launch we got so busy with bug reports and quality of life features that we already had a lot of people showing up at level 1 million before we could even do that. So now I think it's too late to do that exact idea. I suppose it could be a later level. We probably just should have acted sooner on that. My current plan for the enigmatic fragments, which is the mythic resource, is to use them as a currency in a special kind of skill shop where you can buy new skills for characters. But a lot of details still need to be worked out for that. And then empty spaces in the compendium. It's kind of what I touched on earlier with items not being in the game yet. In this case specifically, they're actually new ores that we planned for the second dungeon, like I think Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald and some other stuff. So again, those should be available sometime in the near future. Did you have plans for adding new characters from the start? Like, did you always know you were going to use the wizard? And was it convenient to start with someone with pre-existing art? Basically, yes to all of that. Those classes were in Soda Dungeon 1, you know, the wizard, the tavern owner, the blacksmith. So we knew from the beginning we were going to add those characters. But also, yes, the fact that we have those characters in the game, it does make it easier to turn their assets into playable characters. But that being said, we do also have plans for new playable characters that haven't been seen in the game yet. Was Soda Dungeon successful enough for you guys to quit a job to focus on the second game? I'm really curious about the revenue side of things when it comes to smaller developers. I touched on this a little bit before with how poxs and I worked and how we got into game development. You know, we were basically already doing game development as our full-time job. And it's not that we worked for a company or that we had, you know, any kind of like specific contracts. It was more just up to that point in time, we had already made a lot of games over the years. A lot of games that didn't make money, some games that made money, enough to basically pay the bills and keep working on games. You know, you have to be really, really careful of saving your money and kind of planning for the future because it's not a super stable thing to do, but luckily we were able to make it work. At the time when we made Soda Dungeon 1, my previous games actually weren't doing all that great. And there was a chance that if Soda Dungeon 1 didn't make any money that I might not have continued working on games at least full time. So we pitched the first game to Armor, which is our publisher. They gave us funding to get the game completed. We released the game. We made back our developer costs, which was good. The game kind of like dipped back down, but we just kept adding stuff to it. Like we added new characters. We added a second dungeon. We added we translated the game to a bunch of different languages, and so the downloads kind of came back up and leveled off. And where it stayed was basically enough for us to just keep working on supporting the game and starting on Soda Dungeon 2. We made that transition over the course of a few years from Soda Dungeon 1 to Soda Dungeon 2. As you guys know, we released Soda Dungeon 2 last July. It's been a really good launch so far, and we're just going to continue to work on the game until people stop playing it. So I'd estimate we could easily continue working on the game through the duration of this year, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Why did you decide to make a sequel to Soda Dungeon instead of upgrading the old one? And will we ever see a multiplayer feature? Don't really have plans for multiplayer. It's just, the game wasn't really built for it. I see Soda Dungeon as a single player experience. Anything's possible. I mean, I could see a version of Soda Dungeon where multiplayer makes sense, but I honestly I don't think we have the right team size and resources to pull that off. If we tried, it would be kind of a risk on our parts, and it's when you get into that level of mobile games, it's really hard to compete with actual larger multiplayer games. So it's just not something I see going into. So we did a sequel because the original game, even though we added content to it, it wasn't really made to have content added to it. I mean, it kind of was, but we had no idea how people were going to play the game. I kind of wanted to rebuild the original game ground up to make it much easier to work with. Also, we built the original game in a framework called OpenFL, which was really great at the time, but we basically ran into issues where we couldn't update our developers' tools and we couldn't continue to produce updates, so it was a bit of an issue. So I moved to Unity. Unity also has its own fair share of issues, but so far it's been much easier to stay up to date with them, and I don't foresee it being the problem that we had with Soda Dungeon 1. Okay, are the gold coins in the throne room real coins, or are they made of chocolate? I mean, if they were real, we would just yoink them, right? Also, the rat in the cauldron of the background of the kitchen has a blinking eye. Is it being boiled alive? Poxs says yes it is, and I say yes to both. All right, got a big one here. What was the design philosophy behind strange bosses like Garrick, Demora, and Tengen in Soda Dungeon 1? Is there anything too weak or too OP that you wish you could remove from either of the games, but can't due to how integral it is? Will you release official cuts of the Soda Dungeon 1 music on YouTube? And what is your favorite character from the Soda Dungeon series? Okay, the only real design philosophy is that I just wanted to mix up the gameplay a little bit, so it wasn't completely just idle. As I've talked about before, those mechanics were proved to be mostly unpopular. I was just kind of inspired by older RPGs. A lot of older games had this thing where undead enemies could be dealt damage by healing them. So I just thought it would be fun to do that. In Soda Dungeon 2, we didn't really keep that idea. I think the knight is too OP in Soda Dungeon 1 because he completely prevents ambushes, which is why we made that a big change in Soda Dungeon 2. As for stuff that's too weak, I think there are definitely legendary items in Soda Dungeon 2 that are pretty weak at the moment. But the good thing about that is that we're still working on the game, so it would be pretty easy to change them at some point in the future. Most of the Soda Dungeon 1 music was free tracks that already existed. We don't really have the ability to license them in that manner. I mean, we can contact each artist, but it'd be probably a lot of paperwork and it would be kind of involved. But honestly, if you just go to our subreddit in the sidebar, I'm pretty sure I have a link in there to the soundtrack where I just link to each individual song. Most of them are on the Newgrounds audio portal, and you can just download them and add them to your collection. Favorite character? It's a bit of a cop-out, but I'm just going to go with the Dark Lord in Soda Dungeon 2. Mostly because he was just really fun to write for. I didn't really have that. That was kind of my first experience just like writing a consistent character over the course of the game. You know, we had a lot of dialogue in Soda Dungeon 1 and different bosses and stuff, but the Dark Lord in Soda Dungeon 2 was actually like a very consistent thread through the whole game, and just because of the nature of his character, it was always just really easy to kind of write silly and fun dialogue for him. So I'll go with the Dark Lord. And lastly, the highest voted question: who would win in a fight canonically, the Darkest Lord or the Janitor? Okay, so I'm going to say this is my own personal headcanon, and I say that because it's not really in the game. I mean, I know that I work on the game, but like, there's a lot of things unsaid right now, so I don't know if it really makes it official. But to me, the Janitor is more of a like supernatural being that kind of operates on a level above everyone else, even the Dark Lords. So his dialogue's always weird. I mean, he's a janitor, which is weird. He shows up at multiple dungeon levels and in different dimensions, and he learns the powers of the bosses that you defeat. So there's something more going on there that we don't know yet, that I don't think I even know yet. So the Janitor wins. All right, guys, that wraps up the questions. Thank you to everyone that submitted one. I did try to get to everyone. Sorry if I didn't get yours. I did have to make a cutoff. I tried to grab questions that were asked multiple times in one form or another. So, and I can always do another one of these in the future if there's enough demand. I'm not 100% sure what my next video will be. It took me 6 months to do this one. It could be another 6 months for the next one, but I would definitely like to talk more about Dungeon 2 when the time comes. So until then, thanks for playing, and I'll catch you guys next time.